today, let's focus on the topic at hand. And I'm sure many of you will agree that even in a time of a pandemic, the fundamentals of needs, desires, supply, and demand remain largely unchanged. However, our consumption behaviors, combined with the rapid evolution and pervasiveness of technology, has kept marketers on their toes, especially today, as they work tirelessly to blend art and science in their endeavors to win a game that has always had a moving target. And in today's environment, while media channels may have consumers' undivided attention, business as usual from a content and channel strategy standpoint, when consumers may not be ready to buy, is proving to be challenging for business growth. Well, you're in for a treat today, because the type of content and channels that should be used to maintain audience engagement, to ensure you're not looking tone deaf, we'll hear more about that today. And what brands are learning now that will impact the future of digital media going forward. And before we kick off, I'd love to welcome our amazing panelists in Kirsten, Mike, and Samantha to introduce themselves. So I'm going to just change my view here and welcome Kirsten to the panel. Kirsten, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me today. Looking forward to it. I'm Kirsten Stewart, and I am the head of shaping the future of media at the World Economic Forum, working together with some amazing partners from around the world, looking at not just in the usual times of disruption, as Ian was talking about, around what the future media will turn out to be, but particularly through this massive transition that we're going through right now. It's been an interesting time, so looking forward to the conversation.
Amazing. Thanks, Kirsten. Hi, Mike. Welcome all the way from the West Coast, tuning in, just checking that you're there.
I'm here. How's it going, everyone? Really nice to be here. Thank you for having me. My name is Mike Giepert. I'm the Executive Creative Director for Wealthsimple. For those of you who don't know, Wealthsimple is an online financial services company. We started with automated investing. We have about 80% of the market share in Canada. And we've added products like free stock trading, savings account, and most recently, a tax service. And yeah, we've been growing really quickly. So we do all of the advertising in-house. I was at Wieden & Kennedy for 10 years before this, and my partner there was one of the founders. So brought us in to try to create really great content in-house, and it's been evolving really rapidly, as I'm sure everyone else is.
Thanks, Mike. I can't wait to hear your thoughts on how you guys are doing that. And Samantha, all the way from London, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Ian. Thank you so much for having me. Yes, indeed, I'm in London, despite which you wouldn't be able to tell probably with the American accent. But I am the VP of Brand and Integrated Marketing at Refinery29, which means I get to lead a team of creatives and strategists to build commercial partnerships that connect our brand partners with our global audience. But for those who don't know, Refinery29 is a media company focused largely on young women. Our mission is to be a catalyst for women to feel, see, and claim their power. So we endeavor to create content that provides a really inclusive and reflective perspective on the world through a female lens. The company was founded about 15 years ago in New York City, with a focus on style and beauty, but then eventually sort of expanded its content scope to cover everything from news to entertainment to finance to health. And actually, as of last fall, we are part of the Vice Media Group, which you may have seen in the news, which is great. And so I've been with the company for almost 8 years now, having started in New York and having moved over to London about 2 years ago.
Fantastic, Samantha. Thank you so much for joining us. We can't wait to hear how you guys are handling the situation and thinking about it moving forward. Cool, guys. So let's dive into the conversation. Let's kick off with Kirsten. Having led one of the largest social platforms in the world in your time leading Twitter and a television network prior to that, your expertise is perfect for this discussion. And as you highlighted in your introduction, you now play an essential role at the World Economic Forum, where you work alongside the biggest players in media. In fact, I believe just prior to this event, you just had a round table with around 20 of those leaders represented in media today. So I guess whatever you hear today, guys, you heard it at BrainStation with Kirsten. We'd love to hear some insights from you around that conversation, top level. Obviously, a lot of it is confidential. around what some of the top priorities are during this time from a media standpoint, and perhaps what the World Economic Forum believe those responsibilities are for those companies when it comes to making the world a better place through digital connections.
Sure, thank you, Ian. Yeah, it's been an interesting, the perspective that I get, because I've been lucky enough to have a career where I've worked on both sides of the table, if you want to call it that, and in a few different parts of media. Whether it's when I was at Twitter, I was helping head up the North American business when it comes to media partnerships, and before that, I had a long career in broadcasting. As you mentioned, I was at one time the head of the CBC, and I worked in other broadcasting like Hallmark channels internationally. So having been a part of media for so long, the one thing that has been pretty clear is there is no such thing as kind of a nice, steady period. Like, disruption is constant, change is also constant. And with that, though, I think, what we're trying to look at now at the World Economic Forum, together with the different partners that join us from the media sector, is, what happens in a time of disruption like this? We've just faced a colossal shift when we looked at the digital disruption and how that affected content creation to distribution to, and everything in between. And that having kind of found our way through what that looks like and seeing different forms of media evolve during that time has been kind of exciting. It's scary for many. It's scary for a lot of the incumbents when they've got quite an established business and they've got an established distribution model where they have either readers or viewers or followers in a way that they work so hard to build up. These disruptions come about at times when you least expect them. That's the whole basis of a disruption. Is change is sudden, and you can't necessarily see it coming. But the benefit of making sure that you are solid in a few areas means that you can sustain it, and resilience is a huge part of that. So, at the forum, we're working together with the partners, looking at not just the business side of what the industry looks like moving forward, whether it's this disruption, either the digital disruption or the current one that we're going through right now with this pandemic crisis, but also looking at the business and the societal impact is so intertwined because they're dependent on each other. You need a good, solid, healthy media ecosystem to support really good content. And today, good content is more vital than ever. Everyone needs verifiable, real content, and they also need it on a news basis, but they also we're all staying at home and glued to our screens in many different ways and looking for content to kind of take us out of our various rooms that we're kind of confined to right now. So it's a time when media has been most in demand. Like, content is hugely consumed, and yet it's hugely at risk. So we're looking at what does it look like to get through this time, because business and society is so intertwined in terms of media. How do we make sure that the media ecosystem is strong and can sustain and actually grow and maybe find opportunities in this current shift to really deliver on the society benefits that we hope that the industry can bring.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kirsten. We look forward to unpacking more questions as we dive into the group discussion, but thank you for that insight. Samantha, I think heading over to you, as you mentioned, for the past almost 8 years, you've played an essential role in the global success of Refinery 29. Congratulations, a platform, as you say, that millions of readers have come to rely upon for great advice and content. This also resulted in the acquisition by Vice Media in October of 2019. Congratulations. Now, in a time of such uncertainty, you shared with us prior to this conversation some really interesting and encouraging results, actually, around increased engagement and the success of your brand partners. Can you share a few insights around what you're seeing and how your content creators are meeting your audience's needs?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've definitely seen an increase in readership and an engagement, sort of what Kirsten was saying in terms of, media is being consumed so intensely and intently right now. We've seen that happen across various channels, whether that's our newsletter click-through rate, our Facebook group engagement, our YouTube channel. Numbers are definitely up, which surely, or we do understand, I guess, is likely a trend that's happening across the industry. So, we appreciate that we're probably in, a group of media publishers who are seeing these numbers, which is great. But we also continue to take, as we always have, our responsibility to our readers, to have the right tone, to create content that's meaningful. I think Kirsten said too, like, you want that media ecosystem to support great content. We're still committed to doing that, very much so. And so I guess what that means for us is that we're constantly, in terms of how we're meeting our readers' needs, it means we're constantly thinking about how we create reactive stories. So a combination of reactive stories. So what's timely, what's breaking, what are the things that people need to know right away. We are also thinking about serviceable stories. So what we call tools, not rules stories. So how can we provide guidance and advice without being, super prescriptive, but for being a bit more supportive in that sense. And then reflective first-person stories, which we know a lot of our readers come to because they're seeking, insight and empathy in terms of, and understanding in terms of what's happening in the world. And for that last piece in particular, I would say, true to Refinery's mission, we're trying to find those stories, those personal stories that are often going untold, or come from different perspectives that aren't often represented or don't often have a seat at the table. But I guess what we have had to shift a little bit and adjust, as you said, in terms of looking at things and those buckets through a current period lens, and thinking about what tools we have at our disposal to be able to better understand our audience, which is something we've been committed to since day dot. So that might be calling our editor-in-chief, global editor-in-chief Christine, put out a sort of a letter from the editor and invited people to submit, what are you looking for? Tell us what you need so that we can, provide that for you, which was really lovely. But we also, Vice Media Group more widely a few weeks ago released the results of a global quantitative survey with about 10,000 respondents, I think. That was more about, okay, tell us what you're feeling and what your attitudes are right now given the pandemic. So we've got, a lovely mix of tools that we can use to help inform what we're putting out in the world right now.
Fantastic. And I look forward to coming back to that point you spoke about a moment ago, which is about reactive strategies, and how have your proactive strategies also had to adapt to this change? So we'll come back to that. Right. Mike, heading over to you. We've been watching the incredible success of Wealthsimple over the past few years, and it's incredible to see how you guys have managed to lead the way in disrupting the traditional financial services industry. And it's clear that your customers' needs are at the core of everything you do, from a conversational tone, standout user experience design, and industry transparency. So in a time when many of your customers are likely concerned about their investments and financial futures, how are you adjusting the tone of your content, similar to Samantha's point around reactive strategies over the last 2 months? And what new strategies are you employing to both support your current customers and attract potential customers? And what initial results have you seen from doing that?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting when you have a really wide range of products, right? So we have a long-term investing product where people are giving us, I don't know, $1,000 a month for the rest of their lives in order to grow their portfolio in what could arguably be one of the biggest purchases that you ever make. We have a free stock trading platform where you can buy and sell stocks, any stock that you want. We have a very low risk savings account. So like when you look at all of the different products, it's a very wide range of how people are going to respond. You might have people that are, have lost their income and they're incredibly nervous about what to do, and they need guidance on how to safely withdraw from their emergency fund, and if they need to dip into an investment account. You also have, like our trade platform is like growing like crazy right now. I think whenever you see a lot of volatility in the market, you see people trying to time the market, and they're trying to buy and sell the things that they think will perform really well. So I think part of creating content is not trying to assume that you know exactly what all of the consumers want and need. And I think we're trying to really listen to our clients. Luckily, we have incredible customer service people who are able to field those questions constantly, whether it's a major financial worry or wanting to know how to time the market. So that's been sort of a driver for a lot of the content that we create. So I think on a really deep level, we've had our kind of top level financial advisors get on webinars, and they can go really into the depths of the construction of their portfolios and let people know that they've actually been performing much better than expected during this downturn, which gives people a lot of trust to sort of ride this out. We could also create really quick tips of what to do immediately. We've created a series, we did a series on Instagram stories that are just like really bite-sized little tips on what to do with your money. So really fun, like cool illustrations. We've been doing Instagram live chats with advisors who, we're doing this financial happy hour. So it's like a little bit more lighthearted and they can answer some of these questions. So, and this is almost all of this is brand new content that we've never done up until the last 6 weeks. So we're just trying to continue to churn out stuff. In the meantime, we're still creating, those big brand pieces because you need to, I think you're going to see coming out of this, there's just going to be this void that exists of new content. And I would actually really love to hear from Kirsten some of like what that is going to look like. But for example, we're talking with our media team and we're trying to find out what we do a lot of TV advertising. What live TV is anyone going to be tuning into in the next 6 months? We're really trying to gauge that. So yeah, I would just say it's being, continuing to stay true to what your brand is, not trying to change your tone entirely, but then being, really listening to your audience and trying to fully understand what they need. Because a lot of this is not just, we're there for you. A lot of this is actually people really need major financial help right now. So we're just trying to be reactive to that.
Amazing. And your newsletter came through yesterday, perfect timing ahead of this panel. And it was brilliant. Your tone just strikes the right balance of support and insight. Let's go into a bit of a group discussion and let's start with the topic of adjusting to the new normal, starting with Samantha and Mike here. Just thinking about the evolution of your communications and content plan. You've touched on it a little bit here. I want to go into how your proactive strategies have had to evolve, obviously combined with some reactive strategies, and what activities needed to be scrapped or paused indefinitely. How are you and how often are you sort of needing to adjust? Let's start with you, Samantha.
Yeah, sure. So, I think probably like our editorial team, which is headed up by Jillian Orr, who's amazing. I'm sure, or I know that they had to, as I'm sure many brands or media companies did, they had to look at their upcoming programming slate, like what they had on the schedule, and sort of look at it with a new lens and understand whether, what was planned made sense given the current climate or whether things should be paused. And what I think held true was the idea that Refinery is so committed to telling, a particular type of story, representing, underrepresented voices. And so it was really about thinking, okay, how can we continue to champion that given the current climate, and how can we continue to find stories that still share that narrative or spread that message, given the current climate. So an example of how the team adjusted was Money Diaries is one of the most, well-known series on Refinery, a super popular series that essentially follows individuals for 7 days and chronicles their spending habits. And so you get sort of a peek into the lives of those people through the lens of their finances. And it's user generated, so people submit, what their habits are and what their spendings are, and they have these individuals are really great writers too, so they're often adding their personality, their humor, and their style to the content. And we get such a range of individuals who submit, so we're able to tell a wide range of stories. But for now, we've been sort of spotlighting the experiences and the realities of different people who are disproportionately affected by the pandemic, or especially affected. So we've been sharing stories from A&E nurses or individuals who have been recently furloughed, or facilities managers or restaurant managers who might no longer be employed. So that sort of adjustment, I think, has been made with still the core purpose at the heart, but with the sort of pivot into how we can spotlight different stories. But another activity that's sort of been adjusted, I guess, during the given the current climate, is we are really proud to create a lot of our own stock photography. Refinery has been really committed to, you know, the visual representation as well as the narrative and the editorial. And so Piera, who's our creative director, from very early on was like sort of, she created what was called the anti-stock archive. And she was really eager to, you know, create imagery that represented not only our brand, but, you know, women as they are in the world and in all their range and complexity. And so the art team in the UK has actually managed to continue to shoot stock imagery while at home, finding sort of different themes that make sense that you can shoot, you know, while socially distanced or in your space, whether that's things from like digital dating and technology to self-care and grooming. There's sort of like a very interesting perspective that they have now on, okay, what kind of imagery do we need to reflect what's going on at the moment.
Amazing. Yeah. Thank you. And Mike, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think I share a lot of probably what Samantha's been going through with shifting and learning how to adapt on the fly creatively. We were about to do this broad launch of our new cash platform, which had, I think, one of the highest savings rates in Canada and this really beautiful spending card. And while we were producing the spending card in Denver, basically all of the interest rates went to zero. We're no longer able to advertise like the most, like, you know, one of the biggest product points. I mentioned this yesterday. We found out that credit cards are way more like germ ridden than the New York subway pole. And we're like, oh shit, we can't really like release this thing right now. So we're about to do this really big campaign that had, you know, TV advertising and social media, and we've been working with this 3D animation company in New York, Buck, who's incredibly talented, and we're like, we can't launch this thing right now. It's not the right time. But like I said earlier, our trade platform was doing incredibly well, kind of out of nowhere. We weren't expecting it. And so we said, can we divert all of the energy that we've been putting towards cash, shift it towards trade? We quickly concepted a new spot. Luckily, Buck was willing to work with us and able to create remotely this brand new campaign. We've been working with a musical singer in London to you know, create this really like actually joyful spot. It's kind of funny. We talk a lot about what's the right tone for our brand, and should we be more empathetic, or should we sort of like lean into this like you know, in these uncertain times kind of messaging, I'll just call it. Yeah, and I think what we decided is like, there's a lot of that in the world right now. I think there's too much of that in the world right now. I think there's viewer fatigue to that. So we made something that is, I think, you know, it comes out next week. I wish I could sort of share a preview with it now, but we're kind of in the final stages, and it's just joyful and it's fun and it's like catchy. And so I don't think it's disrespectful. I think that's, you also have to be sort of not tone deaf and be tonally aware. But I do think that people are going to gravitate towards content that is, you know, maybe not so reflective of the times. I think like we also still like to laugh and not think about this stuff all the time. It's in our faces. So yeah, I would say that's like one of the ways that we've really shifted. I feel so grateful that we're working with production partners who are able to work remotely, because you know, some of the live action stuff that we're shooting obviously like has to be killed. If you've got a set with 60 people and you need a giant warehouse and everyone's, you know, in one place, you can't do it. So yeah, it's so interesting to see the way that people are continuing to create content during this time where you like, you know, it kind of really makes you understand just how much effort goes into creating great content.
Yeah, and I just want to come back to Samantha quickly. You touched on that point in terms of sensitivity with content, and Samantha, I'd be interested to find out from you in terms of some of your affiliates. How are they finding that balance between sensitivity and promotion? Is there anyone that's doing it really well in your mind?
So, well, our affiliate partners are those who are coming to us and are largely included within our editorial content. And so we've actually seen a really high performance number in terms of our affiliates over the past few weeks, past month or so, which has been incredible. But I think there are opportunities where people are still spending, they're still shopping, there is still a need for recommendations, for curation, for suggestions out there for people to be able to know, whether that's something that they need at the home or something that they need to take care of themselves. So I think that has actually, in line with our tone where we're trying to provide tools, not rules, again, the guidance or the suggestions that might be helpful, we've managed to be able to strike, a balanced tone. Separate from that, I would say we also have our client partners who are coming to us for more of the brand and content partnerships and more of the commercial content. And I would say, we do have great partners still, among them Converse, Dove, Nike, who are sticking with us, and still we're able to continue to bring great work to life and find really, as Mike was saying, really creative production solutions. And it's definitely been a huge accomplishment of, and I stand in awe and admiration of the creative teams and the production teams to be able to figure out how to create these remote shoots in a really, safe and conscious, but also in a way that also produces really quality content as well.
Amazing. Thanks, guys. Shifting to another topic now, where I'd love to hear Kirsten's point of view, which is experimentation and engagement, where we start to look at channels of engagement and that landscape. It seems like every half decade, there's an entire shift to something else that's the most popular thing. And so I'd love to hear from you in terms of how you're seeing social media engagement change, especially over the last few months, and what new media channels are you seeing that are becoming more popular due to increased screen time? Obviously, TikTok's the one that's kind of exploded because of just the natural nature of that content that's unfiltered and human at the end of the day. But I'd love to hear your thoughts there.
Sure, and isn't it great that we've got so many different avenues? Because considering what's been shut down, as both Mike and Samantha have been talking about, this is we keep hearing about them being unprecedented times. They certainly are. Like, I don't think anyone expected that you'd be halfway through the production of a series or a movie or any kind of content and find you had to shut it down on like 2 days notice and not know when you're coming back. That's suddenly it's been interesting to see kind of the rise of the channels like Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, as you mentioned. There's that need for self-expression when everyone is sitting at home right now looking for ways to communicate and connect. I think Samantha said it great when she talked a lot about story. Like, it's ultimately people look to media and content for the same thing, whether it's 20 years ago, 50 years ago, or today, which is they want story. And they want connection, and they want through that story and connection they want information. Like, that's that combination of the three, and the way that we can keep those channels moving is so vital that it's interesting to see how quickly they move and change with every disruption. There's a new form of communication that comes out. So yeah, TikTok is like a great example of something where the power's in the hands of the creators, and those creators are not necessarily the same creators that were self-made stars on Instagram or Facebook or anywhere else. So it's the whole idea that the way that the distribution channels that you use can change the way that the stories are told has been really interesting to see. And I think that when you think back on what we were looking at in terms of what was new and best and where things were moving in terms of production, next VR, AR, these were the next wave, but not necessarily taking hold. And yet here we are in a situation where you think VR in particular would be, as we can't leave our homes, would be a great way to tap into a new way of connecting. It's still taking some time. It's still and again, it's still early days in what we're going through now, and it remains to be seen how fast things will open back up again, and when production can come back to its regular way of creating. And it's going to be a long time before it ever comes back. Like, everyone is talking about the fact that there's not the idea that we can go back to the way things were is I think a little disillusioned right now. I think the idea that we can get back to some level of production after we get through the major parts of this kind of stay home initiative, so that we can flatten curves all over the world. Still, when we come back without a vaccine, without a cure, you end up having to modify the way that you act and behave, and the way that we can create things. So when studios come back online, they've first of all been out of commission for at least a couple of months, maybe 3 or 4 by the time we all get to actually physically get back into our workspaces. When we come back, at what capacity are we allowed to come back at? So, I think that's why you do see the rise of a lot of the social media channels through a time like this, because they do create these kind of distribution means for the individual, for the creator who's, kind of lost without whether they were creators who had already kind of mastered the new form of content creation, which was on these channels, whether you were an Instagram influencer, whether you were a TikTok star, like these, those folks had a head start. But I think you're finding now that you've probably been tuning into some of the work that's being done on more of the traditional networks like NBC, where they have totally gone to Zoom versions of The Voice or of the Today Show, or of all the late night shows have turned to versions like this. So it's going to be interesting to see, will this change the way that viewers expect to see content? And is this a return back to television? We're seeing that media spend is actually increasing back into television again. But those social channels and they're firmly here. I don't think you can say that they are new on the scene. I think they're firmly a part of what the ecosystem looks like when it comes to how content gets created and how it gets distributed. And even we rely on them even more in times like this, when the traditional methods aren't available.
And we'll come to smaller media budgets in a second, because I think a lot of our listeners tuning in today have smaller budgets. They might not have the $1 million budgets. They'd be interested to find out where the priorities should lie, and we'll come to that in a moment. But you just touched on live there for a second, and Samantha, I want to jump to you, because we have seen that Instagram Live's usage was up 70% from March to April. And how have you seen companies doing live content today, and what tips could you provide for maximum engagement?
Yeah, sure. So I think a very personal anecdote, but I've now regularly been tuning into Instagram Lives from Barry's Bootcamp in the UK as part of my daily routine. But what I've seen, them do, and I think a lot of other brands who are trying to really build optimal programming schedules do, is replicate, I think this is kind of what Kirsten was getting at, a sort of TV programming schedule. So having consistency with their live programming of some sort, whether it's every day, at a certain time, or a certain day of the week at a regular time, being able to find consistency and regularity with what they're programming, I think helps invite users or viewers to tune in, to use, again, very TV language, to tune in and know that they're going to get something that is hopefully entertaining or satisfying or informative or useful. And so we at Refinery as well have definitely been upping some of our Instagram live programming in particular. We've done, let's see, everything from book clubs to live videos with one of our beauty editors, dear Daniela, so going through different routines, to a program called Lunch With Me, which is a series with designers or illustrators at Refinery, where they sort of talk through a project that they're working on, or show their screens and can share how they're building their next exciting thing. But even, and another anecdote, I guess, is internally at Vice Media Group, live programming has actually picked up as well. So as an internal comms tool, there's live programming that happens every Tuesday and every Thursday. And what's great is that it actually brings together different voices from around the company in the form of Ask Me Anythings. And that can be on the topic of food, to climate activism, to health and fitness. So it's interesting to see it both sort of happen in my world as a participant almost within the company, and then see how that translates to program externally for an audience.
Because I think coming into the pandemic, most people were a little bit sensitive or unsure about live, because it's so raw. Anything can happen, and a brand is kind of on the line in a live environment. And so given the situation we're in now, brands are like, well, this is a prime moment to engage with our audience. Let's adopt this and let's give it a go. And it seems to be working. Mike, have you guys been giving live a go?
Yeah, I think we have experimented a little bit. I think it's not something that we've jumped into a lot. So I think I mentioned before, we did a financial happy hour on last Thursday. And it was great. It was taking sort of, existing content that we've created, sort of brought into a, like a more human delivery. The two financial advisors were Zoe and Joey, which just kind of happened to be perfect. And they were great. They were fantastic on camera. It did take, it took a lot of, production work up front to sort of work on lighting and camera placement and audio. These things are not easy to do, but we got a lot of viewers that were super interested. We got lots of engagement. I think it's something that we're going to continue. And I will say, I think the fact that the night shows, like the big networks like NBC, and they're willing to show like just how awkward it is.
Yeah.
Like I watch John Oliver every week, and it's like it's slightly getting better each week, but it's so like it's so nice to see these celebrities and like say, oh, they're not great at this either, and that kind of just like takes away the sheen, and everyone is allowed to sort of mess up and experiment. And I think it's made for something that's really nice. One of the things that we are trying to experiment with, so we are launching this new campaign that's very audio heavy, and so much advertising content on social media. I think we heard something like 80% is consumed audio off, and so we're trying to find channels that typically like TV, where you can have that picture with the audio. And I was talking with a friend the other day, and I've always been interested in Twitch. Like, I just know that the numbers are through the roof. It never just seemed to align with our audience. And we happen to be launching a product that kind of starts to align more with a Twitch audience. And my buddy was like, you should check it out, because lots of DJs are moving to Twitch because of the high quality of audio. And so I tune in and I'm watching it for a few hours, and I'm like, oh, this is awesome. This is so much better audio than Instagram TV. And so it's like, it's, just trying to kind of keep an ear to the ground and learn what people are actually doing. I think, creates sort of a new media opportunity for us.
That's really insightful.
I think that's a great point, like around Twitch particularly. Like, that's the one place where you can see a real transformation, where at one point, Twitch was a certain kind of audience, more a gamer audience, and now it's really taken this opportunity, talk about finding, those opportunities in a time like this. They've really taken advantage of the fact that they understand and have like technical support to do things in a different way, and in a better way than a lot of the other platforms. And I think they're going to come to stand out as someone who's really used this time to get ahead and to reach a much broader audience. Twitch has been amazing.
No, that's awesome. Great takeaway. And I want to go back to that point very quickly in terms of guidance for those companies with smaller media budgets. There's such a proliferation of channels. How do you focus on the key channels that are going to have the biggest bang for your buck, if you will, if it's paid, but some of it's organic, of course. And how do you use those channels to retain and grow your customer base? Any thoughts on how to support a smaller company with a smaller budget? Maybe Kirsten and Samantha, any thoughts there?
Yeah, I think, this one is tricky, because I think the brand needs to be thinking about, or the individual needs to be thinking about, I would say, what is the purpose of the content or the messaging, and the need from the audience or the consumer that you're trying to fill, and then which platform makes the most sense for that. So it really is sort of tailored to what you're trying to communicate and what message that you have, rather than a one size fits all, everyone should be on this platform, everyone should be on that platform. So it's a bit, it sounds like a sort of cop-out answer, but I genuinely believe it's true in terms of thinking about the fun that you can have with experimenting, I would say, in early stages, and trying to figure out, what makes the most sense for who you're trying to talk to, and then letting that, I think, guide you in terms of then committing your time and resources and your spend to, one or two channels in particular. Also keeping in mind, I would say, what I believe is true, and I think Kirsten said this earlier, the idea of having a strong mix of channels also allows you to build, the resilience and the stability over a longer period of time, so that you don't become too reliant on one, and then, there's an algorithm change, or there's something else that pops up out of nowhere.
Yeah, I'd kind of echo what Samantha's saying, and just add to it that, this is not really the time to look for massive change in what you do, in your planning, in your strategies. Like, you need to adjust and move with, what is happening in the world around you, but this is not a time to completely throw out your playbook and start over again. And I think you can build on and adjust what you're doing in this time, and to do things that make sense, like Samantha's talking about. But that diversity and making sure that you're reaching the right audience, that doesn't change in a time like this. You need to, even if anything, you're kind of doubling down and going deeper with the audience that you have, because think of all the distractions people have right now. Your audiences are having to engage not just with your content, but they're doing it in a situation where they're in a 300 square foot, apartment or room, with their spouse, with their roommate, also working from home at the same time, with kids crawling over you, with cats and dogs, looking for attention. Like, we're in really unusual times when it comes to the attention of your audience. And so
and delivery men in the background, I apologize.
Yeah, I saw that.
I'm trying to block them out.
Glad it's arrived. That's good.
I love opening boxes. I think that's good. I want you to do a live unboxing.
Yeah, live unboxing.
But this is the time to really, this isn't the time to, I think Samantha's absolutely right. This is the time to experiment. Like, what better time to kind of do things differently? But there's also a real need to kind of focus on what you know well, and where your audiences are, and understanding that they're going through so much more distraction than they did, in the last 3 months, and when you were last talking to them. You got to kind of double down and really focus on their needs at a time like this.
Yeah. That's awesome. And just conscious of time, we do want to get to Q&A. I'd like to ask all of you in terms of what your thoughts are around, given these shifts we're seeing, and new behaviors and new channels and new tactics and techniques, as we've discussed. What do we think is going to stick going further into 2020 and beyond, that we might have learned in this time? Anyone want to start with that?
I'll go first. Sure. So I think I guess I'll call out a few things, and we touched upon one already, but I think this will stick. The idea of sort of being okay with the imperfect, and sort of laying down the sort of facade of everything is super high production, super polished. I think whether you're, somebody as an individual who's saying, I experimented, or I had fun playing around with this recipe, and here's my, failed attempt, but I'm sharing it because it's about the effort. Like, that on an individual level, matched with, we're seeing fashion brands who are shooting their campaigns through Zoom, or having people shoot their own campaigns at home and using them on their websites the same way they previously would have used a really, high production quality, glossy shoot. And that sort of being, the new norm, cool in its own way, and it has its own personality in its own way. I think that will allow for a whole new world of sort of individuality, style, creativity, which I think will last. And I guess maybe another thing I would call out is I think brands are really having to reflect on what value they offer, what they're able to contribute to their customers' lives on a daily basis, and they're looking internally and trying to find that right message, that right stance. And I guess I think and I hope that will actually be something that continues on into the future as we get out of this pandemic as well.
Yeah, I think if you didn't know who you were coming into this,
totally.
then you're completely lost. I think it's really sad. It's actually been kind of a sad time to see some major brands, some major content creators really get tripped up by this, be so invested in a really kind of high-end quality production that was not flexible and reactive to what we're going through right now. And I think, as we were talking about before, this is not the time to throw everything out that you've done before and start over again. we don't have the time to do that. So because of that, a lot of the brands that are doing incredibly well are those that had, you know, something closer to an authentic presence that can actually shift and move when the world is moving around you. You know, if you are strong and understand your audience really well and how to reach them very authentically, you are always ready for change. You might not know what that change is going to be and how long it's going to take and what it's going to look like, but you're always thinking of them first. And I think a lot of these brands that kind of stood off as legacy and thought that they could survive yet another digital disruption, this is one that this is a tsunami. This is not just a shift. This is a complete and utter change. And those that weren't ready for it, I think, are really showing now. Mm-hmm. And those that have been able to take advantage of it are, you know, going to not just survive this time, but actually thrive after.
And I'm really excited to see how audiences shift. You know, like one thing that I've just noticed is doing Zoom calls with like my grandma, you know, and all of our family who may not be quite as tech savvy, and now she's, you know, ordering things remotely. She's using new apps. I think that that's something that this is forcing a lot of people to change their behaviors. And so, you know, when our target audience was, you know, tech savvy, urban-based millennials, I think that's really going to change. So I'm really curious to see like how that evolves over time, because I think that, you know, a lot of the audiences that brands used to chase, I think, are going to be much broader now.
There's this weird sort of related anecdote. Someone was saying that there are apparently a lot of I'm not a gamer, but a lot of video game remakes that are coming out. And so that's actually been a mechanism for cross-generational connection, because these people that are so excited about the remake coming out are now being connected to these people who are discovering the games for the first time. And so this, like, I totally agree, has somehow, you know, managed to bring generations closer together, or discovery of new technologies or new creativity across audiences and demographics, for sure.
Yeah. A couple of takeaways, 3 of them to be exact. Media and content are extremely in demand despite the outbreak, and readership is up across channels. But the brands best leveraging this demand are those in a good media ecosystem that have a good media ecosystem in place. The last 2 months have highlighted the importance for long-term content and distribution planning and a mix of media channels and content. Secondly, leading brands are actively listening to their audience and adapting content. People are looking for information and support, so serviceable, timely stories and reflective first person have been successful. And lighter content that allows a form of escapism and live content have also done well. And lastly, the challenge is to stay true to brand tone while adapting content. The key has been to adjust, but it is not time to completely throw out your playbook. It's okay to try new forms of content and new delivery formats like Instagram Live. But if anything, you're doubling down to go deeper with the audience and content you already have. And be okay with imperfection, especially when experimenting. And this is forcing a lot of people to shift behavior and will change target demographics over time. So a mouthful, but lots of great nuggets of information and insight there. Thanks to all of you for sharing your experiences and your thoughts on this topic. It's been such a pleasure getting to know you. And thanks to everyone for tuning in. It's been such a pleasure to host you. We look forward to seeing you at our next Thought Leadership panel on May 21st, where we'll unpack what it means to pivot in terms of your digital products in a time of change. So guys, thanks again. Have a wonderful afternoon and evening, and enjoy your long weekend there in London, Samantha.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Ian.
Take care, guys.
Thanks, Ian.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.